All right, welcome everybody to a brand new week of Computer Science 1. Big news this week is your second midterm will be this Friday. So we'll go over that on Wednesday. I can put up some sample midterms and things like that for you. What was the song called? So Depeche Mode is one of the, obviously one of the best kind of new wave alternative rock bands from the 80s through the mid 2000s and things like that. And so the whole album, Songs of Faith and Devotion, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good album. I can post it on the music channel for y'all. You're able to hear it? That's so weird. Some people are able to hear it, it's somewhere. You can't hear me? Testing. That's a bit odd if you can't hear me. Strange. Okay. So, you're all working on the discussion right now, right? The Facebook, good or bad, kind of thing, right? So, one other thing. The Zybooks, I put up a Zybooks last night, so you've got a bit of reading on it. It's on social issues in computer science. And once we're on with that, there's another one on social media. So we're going to have lots of readings coming up. They're not hard. Just kind of go through them. There was one other issue with social media that I wanted to mention that I didn't have on my slides here. And that's the notion of parasocial relationships. So a parasocial relationship. If you're deafened, yeah, that'll do it. Have you guys ever heard this term before? A parasocial relationship? So it means you can perceive like somebody's your friend even though you've never met them. Oftentimes, like some YouTube personality, you feel like you really have come to know them, and you feel like they're your friend, even though obviously, you've probably never met them, right? There's a YouTuber called Chris Broad who has a YouTube channel called Abroad in Japan that my family enjoys watching, and the dude's this very sarcastic and funny British fellow who talks about life in Japan and stuff like that. And obviously, since I'm studying Japanese right now, it's like, a very relevant thing for me to watch. And what we've noticed is that, he's got like sort of this network of friends that he kind of does videos with, and like, oh, is he going to get together with this girl Char, or why is he always so mean to this friend, and Natsuki is such a nice and kind of weird quirky Japanese guy. And so we'll like talk about all the people in like his network as if they were kind of like part of our extended network of friends, and obviously we've never met them, they're just they're not just people on YouTube, but it's not like we have any sort of relationship. So that's a parasocial relationship. And very common, like with celebrities, when what was his name? River Phoenix. When River Phoenix died, he was this young actor who died from an overdose at, I think, Johnny Depp's club, right? Yeah. So there were a huge number of people at my school that day just crying, and it was like they had lost a friend, and they had never met the guy, It's just a parasocial relationship, Why people defend famous people they've never met, yeah. Part of the internet. They're not going to invite you to an expensive dinner, yeah. Online friend, yeah, not an online friend. Like I have friends that I've never met in real life, but like we talk to each other and we play video games together and things like that. And sometimes, like, my online friends become real life friends, which is maybe not something that is always recommended, but, there are people that were only in, like, my World of Warcraft guild, and two of them got married, and so some of my friends drove to their, we've never met these people, and, they, like, drive across the country to go, meet them or something. And, the leader of my Quake clan lives in Oregon, and when he came down to SoCal to visit his brother in San Juan Capistrano, he's like, "Hey, you guys are in San Diego. You want to drive up?" I'm like, "Sure." So sometimes online relationships are, because it's a two-way thing, right? That's different from a parasocial relationship where you just are like following a streamer or something like that. I think Patreon and Twitch sort of blur those lines a little bit because they can interact back with you and things like that. So that's wholesome. Yeah. And in fact, 20 years later or something, when Valheim came out, he's like, "Oh, I see you're playing Valheim. You want to play with me?" I'm sure, And so, it's been 20 years and we're still friends. It's pretty cool. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's just something to think about, whether that's healthy or unhealthy. I'll let you think about it. So we're going to talk today about cognitive biases, and cognitive biases are oftentimes confused with logical fallacies. A logical fallacy is when an argument doesn't work. Okay. So, for example, if I say, because I have a bottle of life water in my hands right now, you will have a midterm on Friday. What fallacy is that? I just made an argument, and the logic doesn't work. So, which fallacy that we've studied would that one be? Because I have a bottle of life water in my hand, which I do, it's true. There will be a midterm on Friday, which is also true. What fallacy is that? Do you remember what it's called when just there's no connection between? Do you remember what it's called when there's no connection between the two parts? Good question. Because there is no logical connection, right, between the antecedent and the consequent. Avoid the consequent? No. No, that would be a non sequitur. So non sequitur is when there's just like no logical connection between the two. It's like when the United Nations blamed the coronavirus pandemic on the patriarchy. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not seeing that one. Sorry. Non sequitur. Yeah, very good, quitter. So that's a fallacy. A fallacy is when you make an argument and the argument doesn't work. There's some flaw in the logic somewhere. If I tell you that if I drink water, I will become hydrated. Premise 1. If I drink water, I will get hydrated. Great. We're reviewing for the midterm now. If I drink water, I will get hydrated. Premise 2. I'm hydrated. Conclusion. I drink water. What fallacy is that? I had a friend who trusts an online friend with all her personal info. Don't be that person. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like I don't, recommend like the whole, like there's all sorts of horror stories about people being scammed or kidnapped and things like that. So, I'm not suggesting you go out and go to somebody's wedding you've never met before. It's a very, what was the argument again? If I drink water, I will become hydrated. And I think that's true, right? If I drink water, I'll become hydrated. Again, I'm not really super interested in hair splitting and things like that. Well, how much water are you drinking? I'm just, we'll just go with that, It's a true implication, let's say. Premise 1, if I drink water, I'll get hydrated. Premise 2, I am hydrated right now, which is also true. I'm not thirsty at all. Conclusion. I drink water. What fallacy is that? This might give you a clue. I'm hydrated because I've been drinking coffee. Because I'm drinking water. Affirming the consequent. Very good. Okay. She's trusting with people. Yeah, that's the kind of people that need to not be on the internet or something. I don't know. Okay, yeah. Affirming the consequent. They could have had juice. Exactly. There's just because water hydrates me, if I know that I'm X implies Y. Y is true. But there's other things that could cause Y. I could be hydrated from drinking juice or milk or coffee or whatever. Or water. Yeah. Okay, so what's different with a cognitive bias? What's different from a cognitive bias? Powerade. Yeah, sure. 10 for $10. Yeah. So what's different about a cognitive bias is that these are problems with our brain. Okay? So these aren't necessarily flaws in reasoning. I mean, it's not like they're flaws in logic. Like you're making an argument and, the logic doesn't work. A cognitive bias is the result of our brains being imperfect. Okay? We're not great at... The human brain, by the way, is an amazing organ. It is my second favorite organ in the human body. And that said, it is there's a lot of shortcuts the human brain takes. For example, humans are really bad at estimating probabilities when they're like less than 1%. So to the human brain, all probabilities less than about 1% are about the same. So whether it's like 0.001% chance or 0.0001% chance, they all kind of feel about the same. And that's why people buy lottery tickets, right? Because it's like, well, you got a chance. I understand it's not a big chance, but we sort of intuitively feel like it should be around a fraction of a percent somewhere. I got a chance. Everybody's got the same chance that buys a ticket. So. Do you guys understand? Like, and that's, I think, one of the issues driving the pandemic is that, like, I got a chance to die from it, but, like, it's just a fraction of a percentage, right? That I'll die from COVID, so I'm not going to, wash my hands. I'm going to go not get vaccinated. I'm going to go lick doorknobs. Right. So there's other things like negative perception bias, which we are far more sensitive to negative criticism than we are to positive criticism, right? Like if you play some music, right, and just not like this happened to me, but like let's say you play some music and everyone was like, oh, what a great time. But this one person's like, how long have you been playing the viola for? I'm like, a year? And they're like, yeah, it shows. Yeah. That's the person you remember. You know what I mean? And so cognitive biases are things that are sort of like shortcuts or bad features of the human brain. And you can see there's a lot of them. Like status quo bias, we prefer the status quo, the way things are, over unknown change. We're worried by change a lot of times. And so if you look at how like voters vote, a lot of times they'll just vote for keeping, the world the same because they understand it, even if the change might be better. Right? So, jeez. Who licks doorknobs? Mind reading is another common one. one down here. Oftentimes we think we have the ability to be telepathic and to read the minds of other people. And as last semester proved, where I was able to convince pretty much the entire class that a blue shirt was not blue. We're actually quite bad at it, And and so anyway. So let's go through some of my favorite cognitive biases, and there's a lot more than this. There's like 200 or so on Wikipedia. Okay. So and they're not always bad. It's not always bad. It's oftentimes the fact that we are able to take shortcuts is one of the reasons why humans are able to, get about in the world, and a computer can't. Like, despite spending a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to program cars to like drive, like it's still like a long way from being perfect. You know what I mean? So, whereas humans, like you just take a random 16-year-old who, doesn't know any better and teach them how to drive. It's not that hard. Okay. So here's one cognitive bias. Sunk cost fallacy. You've got 100,000 lines of code on a project, and you realize that it's all wrong. Like you've just taken the wrong approach towards it. So you could either fix it, and fixing it would take 150 hours, or you could just wipe it and rewrite it from scratch in 100 hours. And a lot of people will choose to fix it instead, even though functionally it's just a waste of time, because once you've invested time and money into something, like you don't want to give it up. Right? Do you see the difference between this and like a logical fallacy? Like, there's no argument being made here. This isn't an argument. It's just like, I've redone my deck 3 times, and I'm not giving up on it now, even though it keeps collapsing into the marsh. I'm just gonna keep trying. So, with your Scratch, you either fix what's wrong or redo everything. You're killing me, Ashley. So that was a thing right before the pandemic, where like for whatever reason it was a thing in Japan before coronavirus hit. And it became less popular after coronavirus hit. You're welcome. This is what you came to college for. When you were in high school and people were like, "Oh, what do you want to do in college?" They were like, all of you were like, I want to take Kearney's Seaside 1 class so I can look at people licking doorknobs. That's why I'm going to college. That's why I'm here, right now. Okay. So, do you guys understand sunk cost fallacy? Like, once you're invested in something, like, you don't want to let it go. Even though it's going to be more expensive to keep it than it is to let it go. Okay. All right. Because you don't want to feel like you wasted your time. Or like, you buy a house, your house goes underwater. It would be cheaper to just walk away from your mortgage and buy a new house. This happened a lot about 10 years ago during the housing crisis. Houses were, people were flipping houses a lot. House prices were going through the roof, and then when the housing market collapsed, all of a sudden your house was worth negative $200,000, and so all you had to do was just leave, just walk away from it, abandon your mortgage, the bank eats the cost, and then you buy a new house, somehow. Although people will not want to loan you, money at that point, but houses were so cheap then, like you could probably put something together. But people would stay in their house just because, I made this decision, I'm going to stick with it, even though it was a $300,000 anchor around your neck. So I have people who aren't 18 in here. It's just doorknobs. It's nothing sexual about it. Okay. So, sunk cost fallacy is this. Even though it would be cheaper to walk away from a project, people will tend to stick with it when they have a lot of time and money invested. So, do you guys understand? So people will stick with things even though they're a bad decision because, I don't want to change my mind. I don't want to be seen as flighty. I've invested time. I don't want to feel like it's a waste of my time. Okay. Okay, so survivorship bias. So this is a really common one if you're studying successful people. It's one of those things where, especially, there's kind of two kinds of people that study, the habits of Bill Gates and Elon Musk and things like that. And there's the people that are sort of desperate to make a lot of money, and so they buy all these books, self-help books, and look, all these CEOs took these fantastic risks. They bet the farm and they won. Therefore, in order for me to become rich, I have to bet the farm. I have to take out a mortgage, borrow money from all of my friends and family up to the maximum, put it all on a restaurant, And the reality of the situation is all you're seeing, if you only look at lottery winners, you would think that the lottery is a good deal. Right? Do you see what I'm getting at here? And the other kind of people are people that are generally, well, maybe there's three kinds. I've seen people that are always status conscious and things like that. They're always buying the latest Teslas and the latest houses and things like that. And they sort of obsess over what more successful people do. And then there's people who are sort of generally interested in self-improvement. And they're all right, what, virtue ethics, what virtues do I need to cultivate in myself to do better? So, he became famous after fighting a gorilla. I'll do it too. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Look at these people that are streaming on Twitch. They're not any funnier or any better at video gaming than I am, so I could become successful on Twitch as well. And who knows? Maybe that's true. But it gives you a very distorted view on reality, because if you only study the people that succeed at something and you ignore the people that fail, it gives you a very distorted view of reality. Right? Because you need to figure out, if I bet the farm on a restaurant, what is the chance that my restaurant will succeed? Right? Sure, there's a chance it'll become wildly successful, will become the next Spago or, 3-star Michelin rated pizza joint. Streamers' jobs look so easy, and I'm sure there's more to it, right? And so, I know people that have tried that route of streaming and streaming other things as well, and it's actually hard. It's actually surprisingly enough, it's not there. There kind of is no easy route to make lots of money in life, and that's why I like athletic documentaries. At some point, they all fail, or documentaries of rock stars. But even still, they always do documentaries of rock stars, and so VH1 behind the music, and then the rock band would have these internal conflicts, and they'd break up. And that's useful. If you're going to be in a rock band, you should probably be aware of the dangers of partying too much and managers stealing the rights to the company, bands kicking people out, how to deal with success, because that's actually one of the hardest things in life, is actually dealing with success. You don't think that's a problem, but success is actually a big psychological problem to deal with, because most people aren't used to it. I'm not talking about moderate success, but actually having lots of money, enough money that you can kind of do what you want. It ruins a lot of people. And sure, you're yeah, that's a great problem to have, but is it? Look at OJ, right? He turned into a murderer. One of the friends of my family was this guy named Vic Braden, who had a PBS show. I went over to his house in Orange County, and yeah, he's a really cool dude. Man, was it that long ago? Yeah, he had a show on PBS, and his background though was like as a school psychologist, and what he was really good at was looking at the psychology of sports players and figuring out which people had the right mental mindset to succeed at sports. So, like, he would look at a football quarterback and be like, yeah, that guy, nope, he does not have the right mindset. And, oh, Aaron Rodgers, oh, yeah. And that was one of the things he did. And, like, when I was hanging out at his house, like, Sports Illustrated called and they were asking about this teenage tennis player because he was a specialist in tennis. And he said, yeah, so-and-so, I don't remember the name, is a really good player, but everyone is telling this player they're the next, great tennis player. And that tends to ruin somebody, to come to my point. Success, especially for a teenage person, is really, really caustic and disruptive to a person's personality. When everyone tells you you're the best thing ever, there's some people that can resist that, but it's like having the One Ring in Lord of the Rings. Most people just become twisted and distorted by it, like OJ. OJ, for those of you that don't know, he was a college football player that was very famous, then went on to become a professional football player. And Vic Braden was telling, he's like, yeah, look, OJ, everybody just said he was the greatest thing ever. And then, later on he becomes a movie star in like the Naked Gun series, and then he goes on to murder his wife. And so, yeah. So, it's one of those things you need to deal with. And, poor guy. Yeah. So. Yeah, it's really important, and it's something for you guys to think about too. Like, what if you became successful? Like, are you gonna just blow all of your money on Vegas trips and things like that? That's what a lot of professional sports players do, and so, a lot of times, you guys are killing me, these streamers. A lot of times, like, people just are like, oh, it'd be great to have a lot of money, Yeah. So survivorship bias, the way that you deal with survivorship bias is you don't just look at people that bet the farm, bet everything, Don't just look at the successful streamers. Don't just look at the successful people that started restaurants. Don't just look at, you know what I mean? But look at everybody. Figure out what your odds are. If I were to start playing the bass or the electric guitar, 24/7 now, what are my odds of becoming a heavy metal metal god, you know what I mean? Not very high, I would say. Not very high. For one thing, I'm a terrible musician. And the other, there's a lot of competition out there, like, there's just a lot of people that are good at the guitar, you know what I mean? So, leave my wife and kids, leave my house, hit the road with just the guitar on my back, and, it's a bad move. It's a bad life move. You know what I mean? The odds of me making it big are minuscule. So, it's funny. Sounds way too stressful. Yeah, well, it's also just a low probability event. Okay. So correlation is causation. We've talked about this before. Yeah, this is actually from Fannie Mae, one of the world's largest companies. People who own houses make $20,000 more per year than people who rent. Therefore, if we can get more people into houses, we will raise their incomes. Because there's a correlation between, home ownership and money. Because people with money buy houses. Then the causation goes both ways. In fact, if you make money, you buy houses. But also, if you have a house, you'll get more money. That's just how it works, according to this $1 trillion company. And yeah. Invest in this, you'll become rich like this other person. Yeah. Just because somebody invested in GameStop and made it big doesn't mean that if you invest in GameStop today, you'll make it big. You know what I mean? There's definitely a bandwagon fallacy with that. Follow the leader. You know, it's not a great choice in a lot of times. So our brains are wired to see causation, right? Like we talked about this before. Like summertime would lead to higher rates of polio, and summertime would lead to higher rates of ice cream eating and going to the pool. And so people thought that ice cream eating and going to the pool caused polio. Okay. So jealous of small businesses. You've always wanted to have one of your own. Yeah, I have my own small business. And believe it or not, it didn't go under. It's actually reasonably successful. And it's nice. I don't know if you're expecting a cautionary tale there, but it's actually really nice being your own boss. And when your small business makes enough money that you can kind of like be like, all right, where am I going to go on a trip this year, Japan or Europe, you know, and not really worry about it too much. I mean, I'm not saying it like 5-star hotels or whatever, but like, you know, it's like if I want a new monitor for my computer, I just buy it, you know. It's nice. It's actually really nice. And so don't let me discourage you taking risks, but the risks you make should be calculated. Okay. I had this, I didn't exactly have this conversation with the crazy squirrel, but kind of. They liked my comment. So the Crazy Squirrel is a local game store, and they sell board games and Magic the Gathering and stuff like that. And I said something to the effect of like, something somewhere on Facebook, like somebody was like fetishizing like taking risks, and I said, look, you know, starting a business is a risk, but it should not be a gamble. Scalp GPUs, no, I have no truck with people who scalp GPUs and monitors and things like that. I absolutely refuse to give them any money. I got my graphics card the old-fashioned way. I joined the EVGA and 6 months later a 3090 popped, and so I got it. So yeah, starting a business is a risk, but here's the difference between like, oh, bet all your money on it, it's a big gamble. No, it shouldn't be a gamble. It's always going to be a bit of a risk, but you should understand the risk. There's a really important difference between the two. Like the people who started the Crazy Squirrel, they did their market research. They're like, how many places in Fresno right now sell Magic the Gathering and board games and things like that? And how much is rent? How much do you make running Friday Night Magic? How much you make selling board games? How much you make selling miniatures? Where's a good location for it? Like Jen, who's the owner of the Crazy Squirrel, and her husband, like researched their asses off before they started the Crazy Squirrel. Like it wasn't just this gamble, like, oh, we'll just buy some stuff and hope it works. That's a terrible, terrible approach to life. I'll switch back to survivorship bias. You know, and sure, maybe 1 out of 100 of those will succeed, but it's a risk, but it was a calculated risk, and they knew what the risks were. It's going to take this much money. This is our expected income. We're going to try this and this and this, and not all of their things they tried worked either. They've kind of redone how it like costs to play Dungeons and Dragons over the years and things like that as well. So that's funny. I've been trying to find a GPU at MSRP. Yeah. I got mine below MSRP, which was rather amusing. They honored the original price because I signed up back in the day before they raised the prices by like some ridiculous amount. So, and then somehow they knocked $70 off. I don't know why. So I got mine $70 under MSRP. So, yeah. Okay. So you should look at the winners, the losers, and really do your work. Okay. Correlation and causation. We've talked about that before. Negative perception bias. So I talked about that earlier with my music. One of my sister's friends came by, and she's a opera singer or something, and was I think horrified by the sea shanties that we were singing. These people are not divided into soprano and alto and tenor, and they don't even have a contrabass section. I don't know. I'm just kind of making that up. But you can tell she was not like super like thrilled with a bunch of people sort of drunkenly and enthusiastically singing sea shanties, even though that is more accurate than, you know, these like choral groups going, "What would you do? What would you do? What would you do with a drunken sailor?" Like, no, that's not at all historically accurate, you know. But like you can see, she had this like, and it sort of sat poorly with me, as you can tell now. Years later, I still remember it. Right? We don't like negative feedback. Negative feedback is far more impactful on our soul than positive feedback. Why? Because positive feedback is usually a polite fiction. Hey, did you like my music? Yeah, I loved it. Did they really? Maybe, maybe not. You don't know. But also because in you know, like primitive human societies, if people didn't like you, they could like exile you from the tribe, and then you die. In Athens back in the day, in the classical world, they had a process called ostracization, and if people didn't like you, they would write your name down on a piece of pottery, an ostracon, and they would vote once a year. Athens would vote on if they want to exile somebody for like, I think it was like a decade or something like that, and you would have to leave the city, and if you didn't have supports elsewhere, you'd very probably die. And so humans worry, and we get very anxious when people don't like us or when people say bad things to us. And it hurts us a lot more. Like, you could get 10 compliments on your dramatic performance of Hamlet and one negative, and guess which one, you know, sits with you. You know, I rate my professor from time to time, and, you know, when, you know, the one on my Fresno State reviews was like, it doesn't make sense why he takes attendance in a critical thinking class. It's online. Like, bro, like, it's so important that you guys participate. Like, it's not even really about attendance. It's about participation. You have to talk. You know, that's a huge part of the class, you know. And it just rankles me, you know. It's like, sometimes the criticisms are perfectly valid, and those I'm, like, kind of okay with. Like, Kearney tells too many random stories. It's like, you got me there. That is spot on, you know, and that actually doesn't bother me too much, because I'm not going to change, you know. So, yeah. So, so there's this guy, Greg Dreher. So I wrote a D&D module that came out, I think it might not have been 99. It might have been 2000 or 2001, come to think of it. Somewhere in that range. And it premiered at like one of these large conventions. I think it was Winter Fantasy, maybe. You know, you have like thousands and thousands of people all playing my Dungeons and Dragons game, right? And I'm sort of walking around, listening to people playing my game. It's kind of a cool experience, you know. You hear, you know, everybody starts playing the game at once, and so you just hear across 40 or 50 different tables, DMs reading words that you wrote. It's a cool experience, right? And then happens, and this person comes down. You hear them like voice acting the characters that you came up with. Like, it's a cool feeling. And so I'm just kind of walking around like, hey, you know, what do you think of the game? Oh, I love it. Oh, cool. Hey, what do you think of the game? Oh, it's cool. And then this one guy's like, it's not really my cup of tea. And I still remember that guy's name. 20 years ago. And so, you know, it was like the only, and it wasn't even like that negative. It was like, you know, it's not really my cup of tea. You know, it still gets me to this day. And so I was at Strategicon down in LA about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And I was telling this story to my friends, JJ10, who was a psychologist actually at her school, and Nico, who the IT guy at Clovis Community College. And we were all sharing a hotel room, and we are just like kind of hanging out after a day of playing Dungeons & Dragons all day. And I tell the story, and JJ's like, you know what you should do? You should re-release that game for 5th edition and dedicate it to Greg Dreher. I'm like, that's a great idea, but I'm like busy doing all this professoring stuff. He's like, I'll do it for you. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, sure. I'll take your game, I'll update it to 5th edition, and we'll put in a special thanks to Greg Dreher. I'm like, you should totally do it, and you know what? I'm going to give you all the royalties for it. I don't even care. Like, knock yourself out. I will, you know, absolutely, let's do this. And so to this day, like, you can go on to Drive-Thru RPG, and Greg doesn't know this, by the way, so hopefully I don't know, maybe he'd be amused by it, who knows. So, what's it called? Two towers. Okay. So JJ commissioned an artist to paint this cute little girl with a bloody knife. He added that to the game. That wasn't in my game. So he actually sort of took my game and added stuff to it. And so JJ wrote this. And yeah. So yeah, if you open it up, it is dedicated to Greg Greer as a result. So negative perception bias, right? So I don't want to say that person got a low grade, but critical thinking requires participation, not sitting back. Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's like, when somebody gives negative feedback that's just like kind of like wrong, it kind of rankles me. You know what I mean? And so this does influence us, though. Like, some people are so afraid of saying anything online or putting themselves out there because they're afraid of any sort of negative feedback. And so you kind of have to develop a thick skin. And I believe it or not, I do actually have a thick skin. Like, I deal with people on the internet all the time. I moderate a large internet community. And honestly, like, when people try getting to a flame war with me, it's like, yeah, I really don't care. Like, it's not like I'm pretending not to care. I actually don't care. And so you have to develop kind of a thick skin. But like, when somebody's like, yeah, this, like, Kearney loves memes. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. I'm like, what did you say about my memes? Yeah. And so, and so some people like will just be so risk adverse as the result of negative perception bias that it's too strong. Yeah. But I think it's really important psychologically also to just understand that, to understand where the negative perception bias comes from. Like this fear of being, kicked out of our tribe into the jungle and dying, is the reason why it impacts us so much more than positive compliments and things like that. Yep. So, cognitive distortions are when when your thinking is not aligned to reality. Okay. I've already used the Persona 5 jokes. I'm not going to do that again. But basically, a therapist will oftentimes work people through step by step and try to figure out the place where somebody's thinking diverges from reality. And I have several friends that are therapists, and one thing that they want me to tell my students, and have asked me to tell my students, is to tell students you don't just have to go to a therapist when it's code red, when like things are melting down, your life's out of control, the equivalent of like a nuclear disaster is happening in your life. They say it oftentimes is better to go to a therapist for maintenance of your psychology, things like that. So there's no stigma to going to see a therapist. Like, it's their job to talk to people, and oftentimes they can help you make better decisions in life that will improve your life, and you don't have to go just because you're having a meltdown or something like that, right? So I try to turn people's negativity into constructive criticism if it's accurate. Yeah. For me, criticism that's accurate, it's like, fair enough, like to be perfectly honest, like some of my negative reviews on Rate My Professor, like, yep, yep, Kearney takes a while to grade my papers. Yeah, it does, and I could probably kill myself grading things faster, but when you have 93 people in a class and they're making a minute story each, that's going to be at least, I don't know, probably about 3 hours, honestly, to go through all of them. I've not seen your story yet. You told me it's scary, and so I'm going to hold off till next Halloween. I'm kidding. All right, so we're almost out of time. So one cognitive distortion is mind reading, where you think you can read other people's minds. I know that person hates me. I know that the reason why my girlfriend did this is, and a lot of times you actually don't know what people are thinking. Once I was talking to a friend of mine, and I got in the car and drove to the park, and she thought that I was cold shouldering her, like I was mad at her because suddenly I stopped responding to texts. And so I had like 4 or 5 panic texts. I'm like, no, I was just going to the park and I was in the car, like, But she had developed this entire mental model that I just stopped talking to her, and I was like, no. It's just, I was just getting in the car and going to Woodward Park, Dunning-Kroger effect is something I'm personally an expert on. I don't know if any of you guys are experts on the Dunning-Kroger effect, but I am personally. I've only read a little bit about it, but I really feel confident in my knowledge on the Dunning-Kroger effect, and I feel like I'm really qualified, even though I've only did a cursory Google search. I feel like I am, as a professor, am capable of lecturing on this and telling you everything that I know about the Dunning-Kroger effect. Have you guys ever encountered people like that online? That they've done the most brief, cursory Google search, and then they tell you that you're uninformed on a subject that you know a lot about, and that they suggest you do a Google search too and educate yourself on it. Yeah. So, yeah, I had a guy tell me, "Oh, computer science, anyone can do that." I was like, "Excuse what?" Programmers are a dime a dozen. All right, go find somebody else who's willing to work with your ass for free, And he couldn't. Guess what? So that business didn't go anywhere because he thought the programmers that I brought on board were taking too big a share of the company. I was like, all right, try to find another team of programmers that will do it for you, and he couldn't. And so the business went nowhere, even though it was about ready to release. So, yeah, so the Dunning-Kroger effect is when you think you're an expert on something because you've done a little bit of research on it. And this crops up everywhere on the internet. Google scholars are cancer. Yeah, where did you get your PhD from? I Googled something. I spent like 30 seconds Googling something. I can show you screenshot after screenshot of somebody who's done a cursory Google search. Like, there's something called the Halting Effect, the Halting theorem in computer science. It's a very deep and profound theorem in computer science. It's absolutely true. And people, have never heard of it before. They'll Google it, and then they think they know more than me on the subject. It's like, Hey, the people that bring down the newcomers saying the struggles would be an easy task for them. Yeah. My mom's saying my dad's a mechanic because he knows cars. Yeah, Google scholars are cancer. And it's really frustrating when you're in a business situation, because we're starting a business together. And and he torpedoed it because he felt like his share should be greater because he had the idea. He didn't do any work on it. He didn't make the database or the website or the app or anything. He didn't do any of the engineering on it. He just had the idea. And as such, he felt like his share should be greater than an equal share from the people that actually did the work. And he said, computer science, anyone can do that. It's ideas that are hard to come by. Other way around. Ideas for business are very easy to come by. Super easy to come by. Most people have 5 ideas for a company just sitting in the back of their head. It's the actual doing the work that's the hard part. And making it work and testing it and rolling it out and marketing it, that's the hard part, not the idea. Sorry, bro. And he just pissed me off when he said computer science programmers are a dime a dozen. No, especially not any that'll work with you for free on building a product. No. Pay us $100,000. You can insult us all you want. You know what I mean? So, people that only read the title, yeah, they do just the most cursory search, and they think they're an expert. That's the Dunning-Kroger effect. What happens is that after you actually start studying a subject, you realize that you don't actually know that much at all. All right, see you. See, Alexander. Let me just pull up one graph here, and then we'll call it a day. So the Dunning-Kroger effect is you know a little bit and you become very, very confident in your knowledge of the subject. Then after you study a little bit more, you're like, oh wait, this is a huge subject. I don't actually know it very well. And then by the time you get your PhD, like, you have a much more nuanced opinion on yourself and on the matter. Like, I'm fairly good at computer science, and I'm well aware of how little computer science proportionally I know. You know, there are professors in the Fresno State Computer Science Department that I literally don't even know what their specialty means. I've never even heard of their specialty before. Like M theory or something. Like, what the hell is M theory? No idea. And at this point, I'm too afraid to ask. So, you know, when you study something a lot, you have a much more nuanced view, and your confidence never reaches the point of somebody who's done a 30-second Google search and now knows they're the expert at everything. Just Google it. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hope you had fun today, and we will pick this back up on Wednesday with a midterm review, and then we'll do the midterm on Friday. Okay. See you then.